The history of hip-hop biopics in cinema carries with it certain obligations that most films do not face. When you dramatize the life of a musician, you are not simply dramatizing events. You are interpreting a body of work that millions of people carry with them as the soundtrack to their own lives. You are, in essence, deciding what will be remembered. Universal Pictures' upcoming film Snoop, directed by Craig Brewer, must make all of these choices. The film, scheduled for release on August 6, 2027, will chronicle the rise of Calvin Broadus Jr., known to the world as Snoop Dogg from Long Beach in the early 1990s, to his emergence as one of the most consequential figures in popular culture. Any honest telling of Snoop's story involves a figure who occupies an unusual in narrative history, someone so essential to another person's success that their presence feels almost inevitable, yet someone whose own psychological depths and motivations remain less explored than those of the artist they helped create. Dr. Dre is that figure. And on August 20th, 2026, Universal announced that Myles Bullock Be, an actor with a careful eye for character and an emerging reputation for bringing depth to complex roles, would play him. Casting was announced not as a surprise, but as a logical conclusion. Bullock Be, 35, had already worked with Brewer on the 2024 Peacock limited series Fight Night, The $1 Million Heist, where he appeared alongside Kevin Hart, Taraji P. Henson, Samuel L. Jackson, and Terrence Howard. In that production, which recounted the real story of a famous robbery at a boxing tournament, Brewer demonstrated his interest. Einstein's stories where historical fact meets human contradiction. The director's filmography suggests he gravitates toward narratives where people contain multitudes, where a pimp might aspire to be a rapper, or where a long-forgotten comedian might attempt to revive a career in the margins of respectability. Bullock Be has built his own career on similar instincts. He is not an actor known for playing obvious villains or straightforward heroes. His roles in the Starz series BMF, Marvel's Runaways, and the 2023 Hulu remake of White Men Can't Jump suggest an actor interested in the contradictions within people, the ways that ambition and damage coexist, the ways that survival and compromise become indistinguishable. Yet casting Bullock Be as Dr. Dre raises a particular kind of pressure, one that extends beyond the typical demands of biographical drama. The role requires an actor to inhabit a person who was, by most accounts, operating at the height of his creative and commercial power during the specific period the film will cover. It would become the most influential West Coast rap album of its era, a record that established the sound of guff funk and introduced the world to Snoop Dogg. 1 year later, Snoop released Doggystyle, produced entirely by Dre. In the span of 2 years, 2 albums had reshaped the landscape of American popular music. The relationship between these two figures was not typical of producer and artist. Yuo Wanhar. When Dre first heard Snoop, the story goes, he was at a bachelor party. Someone played a tape of demos. Something in what he heard caused him to take the younger artist seriously enough that he integrated Snoop into nearly every decision on the Chronic Snoop. He didn't simply sing on the record. He helped shape its atmosphere, its energy, its voice. In an interview included in the HBO documentary series, The Defiant Ones, Dre recalled the moment he heard Snoop as an almost accidental discovery. He didn't audition him through traditional means. He listened to a tape and knew. This kind of certainty appears rarely in the historical record of music, yet it remains central to how Dre's entire legacy is understood. What Bullock Be must capture, then, is not simply a man producing an album. He must capture the creative conviction of someone who, at a decisive moment, bet everything on a young artist from Long Beach. The Chronic was Dre's first solo album, his statement following his departure from NWA. He had something to prove, and he chose to prove it by giving an unknown rapper more than half of the record. The casting also speaks to something less obvious, an acknowledgement that the Snoop story cannot be told without seriously engaging with the Dre role. For years, hip-hop biopics have treated producers as supporting players. They appear in scenes, deliver wisdom, make decisions, and exit. They are functional rather than psychological. Snoop, from what is known of its development, appears to be treating Dre differently. Director Craig Brewer spent the early part of 2025 announcing that the film would focus heavily on Snoop's younger years, particularly his life at age 19. This is significant. At 19, Snoop was not yet a star. He was a young man from Long Beach with talent and ambition, but without certainty. The man who would discover him and shape his early career. Brewer also indicated that the film would not shy away from the more difficult aspects of Snoop's early narrative. Snoop's legal troubles, including a murder investigation that led to his acquittal, would not be omitted or softened. The world of Death Row Records, the label that released both the Chronic and Doggystyle, was not a stable or safe environment, intersected with genuine danger. By extension, any serious dramatization of Snoop's story must also dramatize Dre's navigation of those same waters. Bullock Be's own background may serve him well in this regard. He grew up in South-Central Los Angeles, raised by his single mother, who deliberately placed him in educational and cultural environments beyond his immediate neighborhood. He attended private school in Beverly Hills. He was exposed, in his own words, to worlds that his geography did not naturally provide. He also, significantly, discovered acting late not until he was 20 years old. In college, he simply decided to study it seriously, earning a degree in dramatic arts from California State University, Fresno, and eventually training at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. This trajectory matters. Actors who arrive at their craft through careful deliberation, rather than through early success or family connection, often bring a particular kind of attention to character. They have learned to observe behavior. They understand the difference between the appearance of confidence and its actual presence. The role of Dr. Dre in this film is, by definition, a role that must contain that distinction. Dre, during the early 90s, was constructing an image of authority and vision. He was making decisions that would alter the course of hip-hop. He was a producer at the height of his powers. Yet he was also a young man who had recently been involved in physical altercations, who had legal troubles of his own, who was navigating a record label that operated partly as a genuine creative enterprise and partly as something far more sinister. He was ambitious and talented and damaged and driven. Bullock Be will need to locate all of these dimensions within the same frame. He will need to show Dre's ear for music, his ability to recognize talent in a cassette tape played at a party. He will need to show Dre's work ethic, the producer who kept artists all night, the man who understood how to build a track from its foundation. He will need to show his vision, the confidence that allowed him to devote so much of his debut album to an unknown artist, and he will need to show something else. The cost of ambition, the corners cut, the compromises made in an industry built partly on exploitation. The casting also reflects a larger industry decision about how to approach hip-hop biopic filmmaking in 2026. Universal Pictures had enormous success with Straight Outta Compton in 2015, a film that chronicled the rise and dissolution of NWA. That film also featured Dre, played by Corey Hawkins. Brewer has explicitly stated that his version of Snoop's story will be a different interpretation, not a sequel or companion to that earlier film, yet one that will acknowledge the connections between the two narratives. The key difference appears to be intentionality. Straight Outta Compton was, in many ways, a film about Eazy-E and Dr. Dre's conflict. The drama centered on two men colliding over control and money and legacy. Snoop, based on all available information about its development, will center on a relationship of mutual creation, rather than conflict. Dre and Snoop did not end in court. Their partnership evolved into something else, a deep connection that has endured for more than 3 decades. That continuity, that synergy, as Dre himself has described it, is the actual subject. Bullock Be will interpret a man at a particular moment, the moment when a producer is still discovering what his own voice sounds like. Dre had left NWA, he had something to say, And the Chronic was his way of saying it. Snoop became not simply a featured artist, but a collaborator, a voice that Dre chose to center again and again. He chose not to. The casting was confirmed on August 20th, 2026, one day before Bullock Be himself posted about it on Instagram, calling it a reunion with Brewer and a chance to play an LA legend. His co-star, Jonathan Davis from the Netflix series Outer Banks, was announced to play Snoop himself. Davis, like Bullock Be, has worked with ensemble casts and demonstrated an interest in roles that require psychological depth rather than surface charisma. The pairing suggests that the film is approaching these two figures with equal narrative weight, not as hero and support, but as two artists whose intersection created something neither could have made alone. The production also carries the involvement of Snoop Dogg himself as a producer, a fact that distinguishes this project from most biographical films. How his own story is told. He has also brought in Brian Grazer, the legendary producer behind 8 Mile, and Sarah Ramaker, president of Death Row Pictures, a production company that Snoop acquired after purchasing the Death Row Records catalog in 2022. The film will incorporate music from Snoop's extensive catalog, according to all announcements. What remains unknown is which songs will be used, during which scenes, which moments of the narrative will be accompanied by which music. These decisions will shape the audience's emotional connection to events. Bullock Be's selection also reflects a particular